Right, so while for many of us our gaze as far as Israel goes remains on what they are doing in Gaza, we need to take a look at the West Bank now too, because where Israel have chosen to raze Gaza to the ground with the far right wing of Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition of madmen wanting to seize it for redevelopment in Israeli interest now that it has been flattened, in the West Bank it's been more about land grabs from Palestinians and the construction of illegal settlements. Settlers from around the world seizing land and property, a completely different kind of a takeover. Well, things might be shifting there now too. Israel's far-right finance minister Bezalel Smotrich, ardently pro-settlement, has gained new powers from the Israeli military at the end of last month with regards to the West Bank, and is wasting no time in using them, allegedly with Netanyahu's support, to fully annex the entire West Bank, seizing it for the Israeli state. Right, so if we were expecting Gaza to fall and be assimilated into the Israeli state as part of illegal moves to take control of land that isn't Israel's by force, we might have been looking in the wrong place, at least initially. Bezalel Smotrich, the leader of the far-right religious Zionist party, a coalition partner in Netanyahu's crackpot cobbled-together coalition, and his finance minister, as it happens, has obtained new powers from the Israeli military, making it possible to actively begin annexing the entire West Bank, the largest portion of what remains of the state of Palestine and home to some 3 million people, the vast majority of which are Palestinian. Somewhere in the region of 12% identify as Jewish, as opposed to some 85% Muslim. So how's this come about then, Damo? Well, on the 29th of May, the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF, transferred responsibility for dozens of bylaws from the civil administration, which is the Israeli body that governs the West Bank, to officials in the defense ministry of Netanyahu's regime. Now, as Netanyahu's finance minister, the equivalent of our Chancellor of the Exchequer, how has this played into Smotrich's hands then? Well, the Israeli Ministry of Defense is set up a little bit differently to ours and basically comprises representatives of numerous other departments who've all taken on various bits of responsibility where it comes to defence, with the defence minister, Yoav Gallant, effectively chairing things between them. And if you Google Israel's Ministry of Defence, you can go on the website there and access a pull-down menu which tells you all the different departments which have interests within the Ministry of Defence, and the Finance Department is amongst them, making Smotrich a Defence Minister as well. Notably in this role is his oversight over the civil administration. Therefore, these newly transferred powers from the IDF have been handed to him, been handed to Smotrich and his team in defence as their responsibility to administer this, get me words out. And this is absolutely something they've wanted for a long time, because Smotrich has long been of the opinion that to successfully seize the West Bank and make it part of Israel, control of the civil administration was the key to that. And now they've got the key. And this all happened thanks to a stitch-up, basically, that happened in February of 2023, where a new administration for settlements was pushed for by Smotrich and his equally hard-right fellow coalition minister Itamar Ben-Gvir. With the civil administration being run essentially by the IDF, this new settlement administration gave Smotrich the in that he needed into the Ministry of Defence, and brings us to where we are today. It's almost as if he planned all of this. For context, the civil administration's primary role is in planning, construction, covering an area Israel calls Area C, which basically comprises some 60% of the West Bank, which is under full Israeli administrative control. Now that is under the control of Smotrich. And of course it can only expand from there. And you know it absolutely will, because of how Israel has been conducting itself in Palestine for so long now. So what have they got power of overall now then? Well, Israel has legal control over planning decisions, as I've alluded to already, in the civil administration controlled areas off the West Bank, along with control over agriculture, parks, forestry, local bathing, etc., etc. The list is a long one, and all covered by the bylaws that were formerly being overseen by the IDF. And given that upon being appointed finance minister, Smotrich also approved the building of thousands of new homes in the illegal settlements in the West Bank, he can now dial that up another notch. And why wouldn't he? He is literally a settler himself. Smotrich literally lives in the West Bank, and as has become characteristic of Israeli arrogance, though, he's publicly spoken out on his plans without hiding a damn thing, as this Guardian excerpt shows. Speaking at a meeting of his religious Zionism party, Smotrich told colleagues that he was establishing facts on the ground in order to make Judea and Samaria, an Israeli term for the occupied West Bank, an integral part of the State of Israel. We will establish sovereignty, first on the ground and then through legislation. I intend to legalize the young settlements, the illegal outposts, Smotrich said in comments reported by Haaretz. My life's mission is to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state. Annexation and the acquisition of territory by military conquest is forbidden as one of the founding principles of international law, including the UN Charter. The comments by Smotrich echoed recorded remarks he made at a gathering of supporters in the West Bank, first disclosed by the New York Times, in which he appeared to refer to the administrative changes as mega-dramatic and a system's DNA. Speaking about his acquisition of new legal powers, he said, "We created a separate civilian system," adding that to avoid international criticism, the government had kept the defense ministry involved in the process, making it seem as if the military was still the main player in governing the West Bank. It will be easier to swallow in the international and legal context, he said. Essentially, if Smotrich makes good on this, and there's absolutely no reason not to believe he will, then the two-state solution will be completely dead, as will any opinion that Israel is in any kind of way a democracy. That will be stone dead too, because this is as completely anti-democratic as you get. This is land seizure. This is conquest. Israel will have killed off the two-state solution completely, though. The only remaining chunk of Palestine would then be Gaza, what's left of it, and for how much longer? Netanyahu's also on side with this annexation, apparently, and again, why wouldn't he be? For one, he's already overseeing a genocidal apartheid state, and given his long time pulling the levers of power, in no small part is this by his design in recent years. But equally, he's now more reliant on the far right than ever before, now that liberal voices have deserted his coalition. Benny Gantz pulling his National Unity Party out and back into opposition, because there's no end game in sight under Netanyahu's administration for what is happening in Gaza. But in no small part can that be seen now, because the plan is something national unity likely would never have agreed to, namely tearing up international law and seizing lands they've got no right to. This annexation is in effect happening behind the world's back, and they hope we won't notice. And certainly whilst this is going grossly underreported, whilst our politicians pass no comment on this at all, it seems, and when one Israeli newspaper, Haaretz, ended its lead editorial just yesterday by saying on this story, Netanyahu, Smotrich and their colleagues are annexing the West Bank right now. They are instituting apartheid and destroying the two-state solution. And if they succeed, Israel will cease to exist as a democratic country. Well, that really ought to be saying something, shouldn't it? From the river to the sea, Smotrich will annex it and make it all part of Israel. It doesn't have the same ring to it, does it? The two-state solution is being destroyed before our eyes. The West is paying for all of it, allying itself with those making it happen, and will wring its hands as they continue to watch it happen, probably. It is institutional apartheid, when the Palestinians will continue to be treated as second-class citizens within what would then be called Israel, their own stolen lands, and they would likely be treated even worse following that. The fly in Smotrich's ointment, which might be a very small fly, all things considered, is that what he is doing, whilst perhaps on strong legal footing within Israel going forwards, is completely illegal still under international law. It's whether the UN, hands permanently tied on the Security Council by Israel allies in the US, will do anything to stop it. Recognising Palestine as a state would give it more protections, but the US keeps shooting that down on the Security Council as well. It is illegal for annexation to take place under international law. It is illegal for occupiers, as Israel are a Palestinian territory, to move their own people in, yet they've been doing so for years without any censure being made against them, protected by vested interests in the West. So why should we expect action now to stop this very, very final action, it would appear? It's going woefully underreported so that our politicians don't face awkward questions over something that frankly should be front page news in the West, given our governments have enabled this genocide in Gaza. And whilst we've been looking at that in horror, the creeping annexation of the West Bank has been coming down the line. So that it is no longer creeping, but actually now fully happening. And it needs to be stopped and called out. All of this ongoing land seizure and ongoing attacks on Palestinians will only continue to see more aggression escalate along Israel's northern border with Lebanon as well, however. And if US reports on this are accurate, any annexation of the West Bank might be a moot point if Hezbollah's capabilities are indeed capable of tearing down Israel's Iron Dome defense system, such as the arsenal they have apparently been able to build up, and could bring to bear if tensions continue to increase. Find out all about that story in this video recommendation here, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.